Welcome to Vantage Points. I'm Hisham Al-Maligi. Today, I have the pleasure to host Judge Jim Gray. Um, Judge Jim is retired from California Superior Court. In 1992, on April 8, as a sitting judge, he held a press conference stating that our country's policy of drug prohibition was not working and it had to be changed. Judge Gray was Gary Johnson's running mate in the presidential election of 2012, and he has been an advocate for people's rights and sound policy for decades. Judge Gray just announced that he's running for the 2020 presidential election, seeking the nomination of the Libertarian Party, and has chosen Larry Sharpe as his running mate. Judge, I would like to welcome you to Vantage Points. Thank you very much for joining me. And why don't you start by telling us a little more about yourself?
Well, first of all, let me say, Hisham, that it's always good to share thoughts with good people. So I've been looking forward to this, and thank you. I was not at all planning on running for office, but I was supporting Governor Lincoln Chafee from Rhode Island. And it was about 2 weeks ago that he had us on a telephone conference call. I was with him and his staff, and he announced that within 2 hours, he was going to be withdrawing from the race. I did everything I could. I basically pleaded with him to stay in there as a matter of loyalty and help to our country. But in a very flat voice, he just said, "Judge, I've made up my decision." And at that point, he hung up. Then his staff asked me if I would consider running. And I said, no, that's just not something I would do. But they persisted, and they said, as a matter of loyalty to our party and our country, would you consider it? So I basically, Hisham, said that I would take 2 or 3 days. I would think about it. I would call various people, get their thoughts, which I did. And they were quite encouraging, actually. And I was talking to Larry Sharpe. And finally, because he would just be a perfect running mate from my standpoint for all kinds of reasons. And he said, look, he was interested in my doing it. I said, all right, Larry, come on, put up or shut up. If you will agree to be my running mate, I will do it. His answer was yes, 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 but he needed a couple of days to make arrangements financially for his family. So he came on, and we're running together. And I'm proud of this, Hassan. I think that we will add a great deal to this campaign, and that we will be able to get our issues answered. As we say, and I mean it, we will do you proud.
Excellent. Congratulations, Judge. Looking forward to seeing you on the campaign trail and hopefully on the debate stage this time around, if we can pull that off.
That's key. You're right. And it's a rigged system too, but we're going to have to work on that. But the nomination first, but we must work on having our nominee in the presidential debates.
Exactly. So, Judge, for those who do not know you, can you give us a brief history about yourself and what did you do as a judge in drug policies?
Hisham, I'm proud of my background. After graduating from UCLA, joined the Peace Corps in Costa Rica. Puedo hablar español como la gente. I was proud, by the way, I was in physical education, health, recreation, and I probably should be in the Guinness Book of Records for brushing my teeth in front of more elementary school classes than anybody in history, but so far they've passed me by. After that, I went to law school at USC, and actually at the end of my second year, led a peace march from USC to the steps of Los Angeles City Hall, and we sent 20,000 letters to Nixon. This was back in 1970, 20,000 letters to Nixon. It was amazing because within 2 months, I was a midshipman because I was being drafted out of when I first got into law school. So I went on a summer training cruise that summer, and they sent me to the rivers of Vietnam, where the USS Meeker County was an LST I was on, and all of us were awarded combat action ribbons. So between a peace march and 2 or 3 months later in combat action was kind of ironic. After I graduated from USC Law School, I went into Navy JAG, where I was stationed at the Naval Air Station in Guam and then in Lemoore, and it was quite an experience. Actually, if we get into the drug issue, I was a drug warrior. I was creating charge sheets against my shipmates for various things, including in the action drug offenses. I was also a criminal defense attorney defending people at that point. When I got out of the Navy, I was a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, actually for a short while held the record for the largest drug prosecution in the Central District of California, probably in about 1977. And it was 75 kilos of heroin. By the way, do you know what the drug record is today in the Central District of California? 17 tons of cocaine in one place. So you can just
Wow.
tell it's just staggering the amount of drugs out there. After that, I was in private practice for a while and then was appointed at the end of 1983 to the municipal court here in Orange County as a judge. And actually, I see problems and I try to put in institutional solutions. And one of those was, it was clear to me that the biggest problem area in the municipal court was alcohol-related offenses, that I had these several cases in which kind of voluntary manslaughter, because somebody who'd been convicted 3 times of driving under the influence before went out drinking again and somehow went through a light and clobbered somebody and killed them. And I thought, why doesn't somebody do something? And I thought, who better than me? So we had up and running the first drug court in the country within 6 months of my appointment to the Superior Court, or the municipal court. And I still remember getting letters from various family members. And one of them I'm really proud of was, "Here, Judge Gray, I was going to divorce my husband. He would drink, he would hit me, he would be irresponsible with our children. But now that he's off alcohol, you've given me my husband back. Thank you." Stuff like that. So we can use this. It's coercion, but we get good results because these people are, in fact, a danger to themselves and others. So I was in the court for 25 years. I was able to help people resolve their cases. I settled the first Catholic priest child sexual molestation case in the country, as far as I know, with a man who was the principal at Mater Dei High School and then the founding principal here in Southern California at Rancho Santa Margarita Catholic school. And he was wonderful, except that he would sexually molest some of the boys in his school. So that was something that we addressed. And I've been active ever since. Like you said, I did put my professional life at risk by holding a press conference, and you said it was April the 8th. It's funny because I remember that date always. I had a civil calendar, and on Wednesdays I would do law in motion, and I'd have the hearings in the afternoon. I'd prepare them in the morning. Well, the day before I would prepare it, but I was all ready to go on April the 1st, and I thought, probably not a good idea to do this on April Fool's Day. So I did it a week later, but that's why I always remember the date. And it was a risk, but I got some feedback from it, but a lot of good responses as well. And since then, I have been speaking as actively as I can against our nation's drug policy for all kinds of reasons. We can talk about them if you wish, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen to me, but some things were more important than job security. I took a leave of absence and ran as a Republican back in 1998 for Congress. Maybe the campaign slogan, "We all go gray eventually," wasn't quite the best we could have done, but I came in second on that one. And then in 2004, ran as a Libertarian for U.S. Senate against Barbara Boxer. And then I was proud in 2012 to be the vice presidential running mate for Governor Gary Johnson. So that was one of the most exhilarating experiences and frustrating experiences of my life, because I truly felt, and still do, that we were the most qualified, but we just couldn't get any traction because we were the spoilers. We were the ones not in the presidential debates, and you're not seen as viable if you're not. We need that to be changed.
Yes, and I remember we met the first time in Manhattan during the 2012 campaign. It was exhilarating. Gary Johnson did his best in 2 presidential elections to try to get on the debate stage. Unfortunately, the duopoly prevented that from happening, as we all know. So let's actually talk about the drug policy, because that seems to be something you worked on a lot. Give us a synopsis on what is the current problem, why it became a problem, and what would be the solution.
Well, there's no solution. There's only a resolution, because the presence of these mind-altering, sometimes addicting drugs in our society will cause problems, and there's no doubt about it. What we need to adopt is a program that will reduce those harms. And as actually Gary Johnson said, that of the problems we have in this area, probably 10% are directly related to the drugs themselves. And they certainly can be addicting, and they certainly can be harmful. But about 90% of the problems, Hisham, are because of the drug money. So I wrote an article actually for the Oregon Law Review, and it was entitled "The 6 Groups That Are Winning with Regard to the War on Drugs." And the first one, obviously, is the Mexican drug cartels. They're making billions of dollars a year tax-free, and they're laughing at us that no one in government will say we seize more than 10% of the illegal drugs in our society. And the more candid ones, it's about 5%. So for every ton of cocaine we seize, for example, we're failing to seize at least another 10 tons. Now you're beginning to understand the problem. The second group that is winning are juvenile street gangs. I would see this in juvenile court all the time, where the juvenile street gangs were using this as a recruiting tool. Hey, you want to make some money? You know, you'll never be in the NBA, you'll never be in the NFL, you'll never make as much money as you can by selling drugs. And it works. We're luring our children into a lifestyle of drug usage and drug selling. The third group of people that are winning are basically the police. You know, I'm not pointing the finger and saying you're failing us, because they're not. They're getting more seizures, more arrests, longer prison sentences, all the rest of that. But they're also getting a great deal more money administratively, and they're winning. It's an amazing partnership between the good guys and the bad guys. The fourth group of people that are winning are the politicians that keep talking tough, and we keep electing them on that idea, and that's our fault, but they're winning. The fifth group is the private sector that makes money because of increased crime. Who might that be? People that sell burglar alarm equipment, security services, the prison guards union, that sort of thing. And now hold on to your hat, Hisham, because the sixth group of people that are winning are the terrorist organizations around the world. You know, most of them get their predominant source of funding from the sale of illegal drugs. Osama bin Laden on down. I tell you, and I mean it, that if our federal government really cared about fighting terrorism, they would adopt the message, the way of reducing terrorism around the world by taking away their money. Who's losing? Everybody else, particularly our children.
It's very interesting, that last one. Has there been any reports showing that terrorist groups are using this drug money for funding?
Oh, sure. You know, there was a while where we actually intercepted, this is a while ago, a freighter coming from North Korea with methamphetamines in it. Every pretty much tyrant, Fidel Castro, Erich Honecker from East Germany, you know, North Korea, very likely. It's the largest cash crop in Afghanistan today is the opium poppy. Yes, it's pervasive. And in fact, just think of it this way. This is discouraging, disappointing. Most of the crime in Mexico, the corruption, the beheadings, have nothing to do with drugs at all. Nothing, zero. It's all drug money that causes those. And it's our drug money that does it. And of course, it's causing a great deal of corruption here in our country as well. When we finally came to our senses and repealed alcohol prohibition, homicides went down by 50% the next year. And the impurities, remember, they had all these people check these statistics in the emergency rooms. They'd have all of these impurities in the alcohol, the white lightning, whatever. It would attack your nervous system. Those went away when we repealed alcohol prohibition. And the capper, you, anyone else, don't take my word for it per se. Find the next 10 teenagers that you find and ask them the question, hey, if you wanted to, my son, my daughter, what would be harder for you to get or easier, alcohol or marijuana? And every last one of them will say, it's easier to get marijuana if I wanted to. Why? Because the dealers don't ask for ID. We couldn't do it worse if we tried. And libertarians have taken the prime mover on that. We're finally making progress. Finally, we have a long way to go, but we should take credit for that, and we really should. It's our issue.
Definitely, yes. The Libertarian Party and libertarians have been on the forefront of this battle to repeal those crazy drug laws and the drug war.
Let me throw one more thing into this, because
Sure.
there's so much. The United States of America has 5% of the world's population and 25% of its prisoners. And it was Senator Jim Webb, who's now retired from the U.S. Senate out of Virginia, but he was faced with those statistics and said, either we're the most criminally oriented people in the world, or we're doing something wrong. Which do you think it is? And it's basically because of the war on drugs.
It's definitely something wrong, and that's another big issue connected to the drug war, because what is known as the victimless crimes, for example, for possession for personal use, that's you didn't hurt anybody but yourself. So why are these people are languaging in jail, and the majority of the drug offenses
for hideously long periods of time. You know, if you're selling a lot of marijuana, then you get a sentence of 20 or 30 years. I mean, come on. We have geriatrics in prison today that couldn't hurt you even if they wanted to. I mean, these are things that we need to look at.
Definitely. And Judge, you
Let
mentioned
me put it this way, from a
Germany has.
philosophical libertarian standpoint, it
Mhm,
makes as much sense to me to put this gifted actor Robert his heroin problem, and he's had that, and he's going to have to be careful. He's making good movies, but he'll always have that craving. But it makes as much sense to me to put him in jail for his heroin problem as it would have Betty Ford in jail for her alcohol problem.
definitely.
Medical issue, bring them closer to medical professionals that can help them instead of making them automatic criminals and pushing them farther away. But if Robert Downey Jr., Betty Ford, you or I drive a motor, you name it, methamphetamines, heroin, alcohol, which is my drug of choice, that
Mhm.
is and should be a crime. Focus on this. What's the difference? Now, by my actions, I'm putting your safety at risk, legitimately, philosophically. Sham, it makes as much sense to me to have the government control what I as an adult put into my body as it does what I put into my mind. It's none of their business.
No.
Other than that, I have no.
So, yes, Judge, you mentioned earlier East Germany, and for millennials watching, Germany was actually divided after World War II and then reunited after the fall of the Soviet Union. So, just to clear that up. Judge, I want you now to address the issue of infrastructure in the country. How would you address that? And vis-a-vis the Republicans and Democrats and their policies that basically does not touch on that issue except saying, give me more money, and then they do nothing with it. And why am I saying this? Now, internet connection is considered infrastructure. It's an essential service to maintain business and law and everything else. Right now, we're doing this interview through the internet, and my internet service is choppy. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm hoping that the recording comes out good, like it's generally good. But anyway, I wanted to use that example to give you the platform to speak about infrastructure.
In this pandemic that we've had with the coronavirus, the federal government has failed us. One of the functions of emergencies, where it could be a hurricane, it could be an earthquake, it could be a pandemic, but it's their obligation to plan, and they failed us with regard to this, because if you wait for the emergency to happen, it's too late. So what did they do? And they shut down the economy. Now look, some businesses are essential, some are non-essential, arbitrary. We had a mattress company here was complaining legitimately that, look, I've been closed down. We have closed down our business, but Costco, a big box company, that is an essential business. It's open. So if people want to buy mattresses, they can go to Costco. So you're hurting me, you're closing me and helping my competitor. So what you do instead, I mean, of course we want to be safe, and social distancing is a good idea, and masks, whatever, but you allow these companies, the hardware stores, the clothing stores, to advertise. Now we're starting to see it, finally. Advertise, we're taking these precautions. We're going to sanitize our place. We're going to wear gloves. We're going to wear masks. We want to protect our employees. We want to protect you as customers. Maybe we'll take your temperature before you come into the store, but then it's your choice. And if you're 80 years old and have pneumonia, I tell you, you're not going to take that risk. You're going to sequester yourself. But if you're healthy, then I will decide, yes, I'd like to go to that hardware store or go to wherever. It should be
Mhm.
that balance. And the balance flat out was missing, Hisham. But what does the government do? They do what they do best. They threw lots and lots of money arbitrarily at different people. $2.2 trillion. We'll talk about the deficit in a minute, but boy, that's going to cause yet more problems. But government really is good at spending money. And so, in that legislation, they spent something on the order, I think it was $15 million to the Kennedy Center, the theater. And they were questioned about that. Why? Well, the Kennedy Center was hurt by this. Yes. What about all the other theaters in the country? It's
Mhm.
arbitrary. It's your cronies. We realize that that is not the way to go. And the government got in the way of trying to resolve this. They got in the way of trying to come up with testing. They got in the way of trying to manufacture masks and ventilators with all their regulations and the rest of that. The Trump administration at least tried some of that, and I'll give them some credit. But it was the government, the food and the FDA, the Centers for Disease Control, they were saying, oh no, states, you can't test, it has to go through us, and delayed it by weeks, causing death.
Mhm.
Libertarians would not do that. We would treat
Yes,
adults as adults and expect them to act as such.
definitely. Judge, so you mentioned that Trump tried to do something, and I want to get your view on the duopoly, the Republicans and Democrats. Is there one that is better than the other in your view, or how do you approach this issue?
Precious little difference between the Republicans and Democrats. I believe deeply, Hisham, that there's only one mainstream political party in our country today, and it's libertarians. You know, we are financially responsible, individual, group, corporate, and governmental. We believe in the philosophy of live and let live. In fact, let me give you the prototype definition of a libertarian, and that I could quote him on several things, but one of them was one God, 20 gods, or no God. It doesn't pick my pocket and it doesn't break my leg. Live and let live. That's who we are. And not only don't tread on me, don't tread on anybody. I mean, that's respectfully. And your life, live my life as I want to, as long as I don't wrongly impede you from being able to do the same. That's where most people are.
Yeah.
It is.
So, Judge, for those who are not familiar with the Libertarian Party, except that they think libertarians are right-wing Republicans, how do you address them to differentiate yourself and the party from Republicans and Democrats?
Well, as I was trying money to various people, they give them to different people, but they can't wait to give out our government money. Um, Financial responsibility, the biggest security threat to the United States of America today. I was the chair of the World Affairs Council of Orange County, and we have speakers and events talking about world affairs. We had an ambassador, Jog Negroponte, very intelligent man, been an ambassador in 3 different states in the State Department. And at the end of his presentation, he was asked, Mr. Ambassador, what is the biggest security threat to the United States today? Without batting an eye, he said, it's the deficit. We're the only ones that talk about this, and it's going to be visited. I'm going to do okay. You may not because you're younger than I, but our children and grandchildren are going to have to pay this back. This is the legacy we are leaving them. Only libertarians talk about this. The rest of them, you can go to Obama, you can go to Trump, you can go to anyone else. They say, oh, we'll bring down the deficit when they're running. And then when they get there, it's worse under Trump than it was under Obama. Before him with Bush. It's just, it's irresponsible. But understand, politicians don't care about the future generally. They only care about the next election. So they're fully willing to pay lots of money to buy people's votes and to show that it's not your fault. And it's just not it's not responsible. That's what makes us different.
Yeah.
By the way, let me add one more important thing. We would require a declaration of war from Congress before we allow our combat troops to stay in combat for more than 60 days. We would actually follow the Constitution and our laws. That makes us much different. And we are the only ones that represent those wonderful heroic troops that are put into harm's way all around the world. And we also represent the veterans who come back with PTSD, used to be called shell shock. It's a breach of contract that we are not giving them the best care possible because they received these maladies when they were serving us.
Yes. So let's then talk about wars and the foreign policy. But first, I want to just note that Negroponte has some history that might be troublesome, but that's not our topic for now. Let's address now. We have troops.
I would be interested in knowing. I was very impressed with him. We'll talk maybe hereafter. It's off the subject, but certainly.
Definitely. Yeah. So let's talk about the troops overseas, especially in hot zones like Syria, like Iraq, still in Afghanistan. What do you think first about the peace deal between the Taliban and the United States? What do you make of that? Almost 20 years after the invasion, now the Taliban is at the table, negotiating peace with the U.S.
Look, it's not our country. I'm going to take it back a couple of steps. That I have a podcast. It's called The Libertarian Way with Judge Jim Gray. All Rise, The Libertarian Way with Judge Jim Gray. And I was interviewing a man that had written a book on this subject. And he said that the Soviets were lured into Afghanistan by in effect, our CIA and Osama bin Laden. Why? Because we wanted to give them their Vietnam. And it was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union.
Hmm.
Then Osama bin Laden could care less about us, but he didn't want our troops in the Holy Land. You know, he's from Saudi Arabia. So he caused us to be lured into fighting in Afghanistan. Why? By launching 9/11 from Afghanistan. It wasn't the Afghan government, it was he. And he was successful beyond belief. So yes, we were lured into there, causing hundreds of thousands of people, both civilians and military, to be killed or maimed or otherwise. We have no goal there. Had we required a declaration of war, we would have then tried to identify who is the enemy, where are they, what is the security threat to our country, what are our goals, how will we know what an end game is so we can, when we reach our goals, we can withdraw. What are our goals today in Afghanistan? Nobody knows, but we're still there. You know, nation building. Are you kidding me? You know, the people over there are, it's basically tribal in Afghanistan, and they don't really particularly get along with each other. The only thing that unites those tribes is when some foreign invader comes in and occupies their country. Guess who the foreign invader is now? We should not be in Afghanistan. And
Yeah.
I regret the Taliban have done some bad things. Some of them are seen as freedom fighters, but we're going to have to let the Afghans work this out on their own.
Yeah, it was actually Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was Carter's national security advisor, who, when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, he came to Carter and told him, now we give the Soviets their Vietnam. And I believe that through the backdoor workings, he got the so-called Mujahideen from all over the world to go fight the invaders in Afghanistan to free a Muslim country from, non-Muslim invaders and this and that. So that's how this thing started. And as a matter of fact, also I remembered a friend of mine used to live in Jersey City, and he told me once that during the Friday prayers, which is equivalent to the Sunday Mass for Christians and the Sabbath service for Jews, during the Friday prayers, after it's done, people from the American government were recruiting openly Muslims to go fight in Afghanistan at that time. So, there's a lot of baggage and history in Afghanistan but definitely, of course, we should not be there, period. So now
when I was running for U.S. Senate 2004, we were talking about going into Iraq, and I said publicly, unless we're completely in accord with the entire world community, it will be the biggest mistake of my lifetime. And Hisham, nothing has happened since that time to change my mind. We have just destabilized that entire area. I'm not saying Saddam Hussein was a good. Then it spread over to Libya, it spread over to Syria, which is a disaster in the world today, and it's pretty much been caused by our actions, and shame on us.
Now, okay, so let's move on to Iraq, Pakistan, Somalia, Syria. What do you think we should do, and why do we have 800 bases or something like that in countries around the world?
It's my understanding, and this is from Ron Paul's quote, because I haven't not investigated. I understand, at least when he said that, we have 400 military reservations all around in other foreign countries around the world. Let's audit them. Let's get politics out of it, talk to the military, see if they're important for our security. Maybe we should reinforce them. But I'll bet you it would take us maybe about 3 weeks to decide that we could evacuate out of at least 300 out of the 400 and be safer than we are today. And as I tell people, I love New Zealand. I love New Zealanders. But if they had a naval air station 10 miles away from my house, and they start flying low over my house, or they'd get drunk and flirt on our women or whatever, I might not like New Zealanders quite so much. It's unnecessary. Times have changed. Even NATO commitments have changed. Let's reassess.
Yeah.
And it's important for us, and it's important for the other countries of the world to take on their own security and leave us out of it.
I always use this example, Judge, when I tell people why people over the world fight against American presence. It's as if, let's say, Canada lost their minds and took Michigan in a military expedition. What will the people in Michigan do, and what will we do everywhere else in the United States? We're going to say,
betcha.
It's Michigan? No, we're going to go fight with every power that we have.
Of course we are.
Why do we accept for ourselves something that we do not afford other people? We have to change our mentality before we request it from other people. Okay.
Let me give you a similar example, that what if our Secretary of State was traveling into Bolivia, for example, and Iranian had a missile fired at him from a drone and killed him? Would that be an act of war? That's what we did against that Iranian general. You know,
Yeah.
let's look at it from their perspective. That would be an act of war. We would be fighting with Iran right now had that happened to us, just
Yeah.
like with Michigan.
Yeah. Okay. So
You
what?
sure convinced me.
I mean, you've been at it much longer than I was. Um,
Now,
let's.
I appreciate a discourse.
Yeah.
Hasham, it's really important, and it's a libertarian value. We should be able to talk about anything, and even we can disagree. I've been on other shows and with more radical people and stuff, and we can disagree. We don't call each other names. We don't yell at each other and the rest of that. It's have a discussion.
Yeah.
And if
Definitely.
I see my position isn't quite on point, then I'll move.
And that's behind the name of the show, Vantage Points. We're looking at the same thing but from different angles, and we see different things, and we reach different conclusions. But if we talk about it, we might actually agree at the end.
Yes, and I also say, and I'm sure you agree, that I don't have all the answers. And in fact, if I find anyone that says they have all the answers, I run as fast as I can in the other direction. So, but
Exactly.
we can discuss these things and should.
Definitely. Okay.
Let me say one more thing. I guess I'm your guest. I can interrupt on occasion.
No
I
problem.
believe, I believe right now the civil rights issue of our time is how Americans treat Muslims and the Muslim community. After 9/11, it's just, excuse me, excuse me, it's just been wrong the way we have treated the Muslim community with regard to immigration and passports and the rest of that. And shame on us. We need to do better.
No, I definitely understand, and thank you, Judge. You've been a supporter of rights of everyone, regardless of their religion or background or national origin, and I appreciate that of you. Thank you very much.
That's called libertarian.
For liberty, I call it for liberty, but I agree with you.
Deal.
So let's talk about healthcare now, Judge. The first, you touched upon the response to the COVID-19 situation. And of course, we've seen how the infrastructure is not ready in the United States. The healthcare infrastructure is not ready for something like this. What do you see the plan for healthcare going forward? And have you discussed Larry Sharpe's plan that he ran with last year, which was impressive?
Actually, I have not. And I'd be interested in hearing what it is because I'm always anxious to find ways of doing it better. Excuse me a second. When I talk about healthcare, I get all coughed up. But
Understood.
I was raised, I'm older than where we had the best healthcare system in the world. In fact, when I was in the first grade, I had nephritis. I had a kidney infection, blood in the urine, and I'm told that antibiotics, penicillin saved my life. We had a doctor make house calls. And it wasn't even a topic of conversation that we don't have enough emergency rooms, we don't have enough doctors for a reasonable price, etc. And then the government started getting more and more involved. And it began really with Medicare with the federal government in 1965. And now we have evolved into this morass of bureaucracy. So that if I were to go to a medical doctor today and say, Doc, I've got a knee problem. And he'd say, well, Jim, do you want an MRI? What's going to go through my mind? Well, let's see. I've got Medicare. I've got Anthem Blue Cross insurance. It probably cost me $20 to $23. Sure, why not? It's a copay. But if I'm paying it myself, and he says, Jim, do you want an MRI? What do I think? Well, I don't know, Doc. What's it going to show me and how much is it going to cost? You ask that question today, the doctors don't even know how much it's going to cost because cost is not a factor in the equation. As a result, what happens? Well, we all know costs go up. Surprise, surprise. So if I'm spending my own money, I will get quality for reasonable prices. Now, how do we set up a system to do that? I would say get the government out of the healthcare system. But then you would have medical savings accounts where each year you or I, because most of us can afford, probably 65, 70% of the people in our country can afford their own health care. So they don't need the government, get out of it. And they would put in, say, $5,000 into an ATM account each year, which would be their own money. They could buy healthcare insurance with it, catastrophic care, basically with a like $5,000 deductible, and then spend that money. If they didn't spend it, then it would roll over the next year and eventually go into their retirement. What about people that have no money? And the answer to that is, from my standpoint, allow them to have vouchers that they could use on the private market on a sliding scale to buy healthcare insurance and even use for copays. That will bring competition back into the healthcare agencies and get the government out of it. And Hassam, if what we want to do is have our healthcare governed by the equivalent of the Department of Motor Vehicles, that's where we're going. But we need to bring the private sector back, again, with an understanding that we want the health of our people to be able to be affordable as well as available. So that's what I would do. I'll have to talk to my friend Larry Sharpe and see what his proposal was. Can you tell me?
It's as if you were on the policy committee, which I was on, and that's basically the plan.
Oh, I thought it was mine. No, it came from Milton Friedman, basically.
Yeah,
He's a hero, but
yeah,
okay.
but we adjusted it to fit the New York state situation when he was running for governor in
Good.
2018. But yeah, okay. So talking.
Let me say one more thing in that regard, because I think it's critical. If I were bleeding on the street right here, you would have no legal obligation to help me unless you caused my injuries. That would be different. But I'm not entitled. Just because I'm alive doesn't mean you owe me anything. But we will because we want to, because we're compassionate people. So instead of being entitled, maybe people will be appreciative, but you're not entitled to it. We should, and I would even put in a safety net for exactly the same reason. Again, Milton Friedman, because I think it's an atrocity that we have this homeless situation in our world. It speaks poorly of us as human beings, not because they're entitled to it, but because we're compassionate, and that's not going to be allowed to exist in my country.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. So now going internally, looking at the Libertarian Party and the field of the candidates right now, have you been in touch with any other candidates other than Governor Chafee? And what was the reaction to your announcement of the candidacy? And we'll talk more about it.
Certainly. It's kind of ironic because I told you that I have a podcast and I tape in advance. And so before I knew I was going to be doing this, I taped Nick Sarwark, who is, of course, the outgoing chair. I taped Jacob Hornberger, had a very nice interview. Good man. I taped Joy Jorgensen, same deal, really neat lady, just a stalwart in the Libertarian Party. And then just before I interviewed Ken Armstrong, I found out that I was going to be doing this, so I told him in advance so he wouldn't be surprised. And so we had that interview anyway. I can also tell you that recently I received a telephone call from Justin Amash, and he is saying that he is putting in an exploratory committee with the idea of running for the Libertarian nomination for president. We had a very cordial conversation, and I welcomed him. I'm a Libertarian, I say. I welcome competition, and it will allow us to get more issues out, and if he can do things better than the others, then that's fine. I happen to think that he won't be able to be a better team than Gray Sharpe, but one way or the other, I believe in competition. There were some that were saying, and I understand on these shows and the rest, that, oh, it's kind of dirty pool, it's taking unfair advantage, that I jumped in after all of the conventions and wasn't able to be involved with the debates. And honestly, Hisham, it's a disadvantage for us because we didn't get a chance to one-on-one in various states. I've only been to the Mississippi convention this year and California, and it's a disadvantage. And I think if we'd had a really strong candidate, it would have been locked up already, but that's certainly not the case. So I believe in competition. I told you how I got into this. It wasn't planned, but I think it would have been an abrogation of my responsibility not to have gone forward. And once Larry Sharpe said he would join me, the deed was done.
I actually have a note written in front of me with the name Justin Amash. I wanted to ask you, what would you do if actually Justin announces that he's running? So what would be, I mean, you already mentioned, but how do you see the competition going forward until the convention in at the end of May, if it's held at its time?
I was one of those that was looking to him running. I heard indications a while ago that he was thinking of doing it. I was surprised that he hesitated. yesterday, I know this is taped, I don't know when it's going to be broadcast, but it was on the 17th of April that he talked to me, called me on the phone. We had a very cordial conversation, and I welcomed him. And so I think he's a good man. I'd never met him before. He sounded intelligent and articulate and gracious, and I think he'll be a welcome addition. And there are many people that will probably they've been waiting for him. I've spoken to some asking them to endorse our campaign and work with us, and they say, well, I don't know, I'm going to wait and see if Justin Amash comes in. Fair enough, that's fine. But I think eventually, I don't know who will run with him. I think that Gray Sharpe will be able to do better, but he said that he will support the nominee, whoever it is, and I said I will support the nominee, whoever it is. If it's Justin, or if it's Jacob, or if it's Joy, whomever it is, I will work hard for that person, for our cause. And he said the same thing, and I applaud that too.
So are you planning to stay in the race if he announces?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
that's not even an issue.
You're going through until the convention.
We are going to go to the convention and seek the nomination. Yes.
Excellent. So what is the plan moving forward until the convention? Are you traveling to any states? What are you doing to, garner the support?
Well, we're still, of course, kind of in a lockdown. I still have my plane reservations to go to Austin, Texas, and I have a reservation at the Marriott Hotel. And if, in fact, it's held, I will be there in person. If not, then I guess I'll be sitting where I'm sitting right this minute talking to you. Right now, what we're doing is getting lists of delegates, and we're calling people and telling them this is what we believe in and requesting their support. And I think next Saturday, there's a debate out of Alaska that I will be participating in. It's it's over Zoom, but that's pretty much what we're doing. I'm treating it like I'm talking with you. Zoom seems to be the way to go. I'm sorry. I'd much prefer to have everybody at the convention. If they do it, it'll be kind of a rump convention, where maybe the Texas delegation and a few others will be there, and the rest of it will be like we are. It's unfortunate. It's just the way life goes. You roll with the punches, and we're going forward.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so I want to hear more about, for example, where you grew up, your family. Give the people more about yourself so they can get to know you better.
I wrote a book on judging. It's the only how-to book for judges I know of. Wearing the Robe, the Art and Responsibilities of Judging in Today's Courts. And the first sentence in the introduction was, the best decision I ever made in my life was choosing my parents. And of course, I've been the beneficiary of that choice for the rest of my life, that so-called choice. And I think it's pretty much given me a mandate to try to help those that did not choose quite so well, because I was so blessed. Elizabeth and Bill Gray were upper middle class. My father became eventually a very highly respected federal judge. I got the benefit of a stimulated childhood, caring, loving, boundary setting. And I have been blessed by that. And so I think it's given me an obligation to help those that did not choose quite so well. I played sports, basketball, tennis, that sort of thing. I was in a fraternity at UCLA, and I've just been blessed. I have one sister. I have 4 children. Actually, when I was stationed at the Naval Air Station in Guam, I adopted a son from Vietnam. He's now 47 years old. He was in an orphanage in Da Nang. One of the best things I've ever done. I'm pretty close to the Vietnamese community for that reason. I have a sister and a brother-in-law who are wonderful people. My children are doing pretty well. And on the 21st of April, I'm scheduled to be a granddaddy. So that's going to be, that's the most important thing that I could talk about. I'm blessed.
Congratulations.
I'm just blessed. You're welcome.
Congratulations, Judge.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming today on the show. This has been hopefully one among a series that we're going to follow you during the campaign trail. And
thank you.
Appreciate you doing it shortly after the announcement, and looking forward to having you again soon.
You know something? Life is good. I'm proud of, I didn't say that I was a lifelong Republican, as I told you earlier, but with the coming of the so-called Patriot Act just did me in, that I could not be a part of any organization that would condone, much less assist, this direct frontal assault on our civil liberties. It took me 13 seconds, Hashem, to realize I really am a libertarian. I will be for life. I'm at home here. And it's nice talking with good people. Thank you for the opportunity. Let's do it again.
Absolutely, Judge. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care. Be well.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Vantage Point. I'm Hisham al-Maligi. There are hashtags and there is a hashtag. This is the hashtag. Take care, America.